All right, and we're live. So yeah, I got this email saying, here's a special deal on high-speed internet, save all this money, etc. And I was so suspicious that my phone was listening to me. But hopefully, with the new internet, I won't have these little network issues I've been having. All right, I can start, Mickey. There are people piling in here, so let's get this show on the road. I'm going to play the intro, and we'll be right back to meet our guest.
Okay.
I'm David C. Barnett, and you're tuned in to Small Business and Deal Making, the podcast, YouTube channel, and blog where I talk about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium-sized businesses while controlling risk. So if you're looking to take control of your future through buying a business one day, or if you already own a business and you're looking to grow or exit, you've come to the right place. I talk about interesting things, I talk to interesting people, and I answer your questions every week right here. So be sure to hit like and be sure to hit subscribe, and let's get to it. Are you thinking of growing your business or beginning a journey into entrepreneurship? Take a shortcut to success by buying an existing and profitable business the right way. Visit businessbuyeradvantage.com and learn more about my online training, group coaching, and consulting services designed to help you win. Welcome, everyone. I'm joined here live today by Mickie Kennedy, the founder of ereleases.com, an internet press release service. And today we're going to be talking about, getting publicity for your business, what a press release is, how we can formulate them, and some of the incredible stories from Mickie's career of helping small businesses get better PR. Mickie, maybe we can start by having you introduce yourself. You want to give us a little bit about your background and how you got into this interesting business?
Sure. I 30 years ago went to a MFA program specializing in creative writing with an emphasis in poetry. My game plan was to finish that degree and then wait tables and write poetry and just live a very bohemian lifestyle. And about 3 years later, I did graduate. I did wait tables. I just realized I was physically miserable being on my feet 10, 12-hour days. And I felt like, I don't know, psychologically just so drained at the end of a long shift that I wasn't doing anything. And I was like, I need to find a safe office job. And so I got started at a telecom research startup in DC as employee number 3. And one of the things they asked me to figure out, because I was the writer, was press releases. So
Okay.
I got really good at writing press releases and sending them to the media. We were doing faxing at the time. And we started getting calls from journalists asking if we could just, email the release. And we were routinely getting picked up by, international publications like Financial Times, The Economist, as well as like U.S. National, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal. And I just thought, this is so easy. We were immediately like turning on a faucet, getting lots of sales. A lot of people in the industry finding out about us who didn't know we existed. And I just thought that this is great. Why aren't small businesses doing this? It really costs nothing other than, a bit of ingenuity. And so at the same time, as journalists were calling and requesting that I take them off the fax list and add them to an email list, I was just like, I could build an email list for anybody and, reach out to journalists. So I spent a year just contacting journalists, asking them if I could email them press releases. And most of them, I think that was 26 years ago, said yes. And I launched about a year later with 10,000 journalists in my database. And I was just a matchmaker. I would have a client who wanted to send something out, and I would send it to journalists that were in my database that I felt were a good fit. And over time, PR Newswire reached out to us and said, hey, you should also consider including us as part of your distribution. And I was really mean to them. I was just like, I'm charging at the time $250, $300. And I'm like, you're charging $1,500, $1,600 to move a press release nationally. I think they're too far apart. We're not going to be able to work together. But surprisingly, they liked that I was working with small businesses, startups, entrepreneurs, and they didn't run away. And we just sort of tried to, put together a deal that made sense for us. One of the smart things I noticed was when I did a tour of their editorial department was they said, we have editorial 24 hours a day, and overnight they're not very busy. They'd sit for many hours, but we have to be here in case there's like breaking news. They have to get something out to Asia. There's a recall, lots of different reasons. And I was just like, well, what if we set up all of my releases for next business day so that your overnight team could set them up, and therefore it wouldn't cost you additional labor? And those were some of the win-wins that we tried to work out. And so all of our releases go out nationally over PR Newswire, as well as some of the email distribution that we're known for. And if you went directly to the Newswire, you'd pay probably triple what it costs to work with e-releases.
So you mentioned there that a lot of small businesses weren't doing press releases. Do you believe this is part of the reason? Like what do you think the barriers have always been with small businesses and press release publicity?
I think that small businesses, a lot of people are really into ROI and
Hmm.
everything being measurable. And PR is not easy to measure. You could put a tracking URL in your press release, but journalists aren't going to respect it. They're going to go to your website, take your
Yeah.
general, web page, and use it. They're not going to respect tracking URLs and things like that. And also, sometimes, like when the New York Times generally publishes you, they usually don't include a URL at all. And so, how do you know that you got an influx of customers when a New York Times article post is just, I assume that's why, but it's hard to measure. And I think that a lot of small businesses don't like that. And it's
Yeah.
very clean. The flip side of it is, I have customers who just are like ecstatic. They're just like, we got picked up in this publication. We got 400 visitors, and it looked like 200 of them bought. Is that even possible? And I'm like, it is. When someone reads an article and they're inspired enough to click through, they usually have a really good warm feeling and they want to do business with you. It's like when I see a great Kickstarter blog post or article and I click through, it's because I generally want to support them. And so that's not unusual. And probably a lot more than 400 people saw the article and didn't click through. So, you can't just assume that everybody that comes through is going to have a 50% conversion rate, but conversion rates are usually high because articles don't set people off the way ads do.
Yeah.
Ads might have a 2 or 3% conversion rate where an article could be, much better than that. And I think that what happens is when we see an article, it's like an implied endorsement. It's almost
Mm.
also like, a social mark that, here's social proof that someone wrote about them. And, people feel like there's a huge bit of credibility there, and they often get swept up and read an article, see a story, and then want to go do business with you.
Yeah. So a lot of great stuff here that you've touched upon. About a year and a half ago, I had a PR expert on, Janet Falk, and she and I discussed building relationships with independent journalists, with individual journalists rather, for a given industry or a market or something like that. And for anyone that wants to check it out, I'll add that link to that live stream in the show notes here. But what you are doing is you're facilitating an easy way for people to broadcast to a vast number of media outlets all at the same time. And it's interesting because you're talking about the press release and how something ends up as news and how that becomes credible. And I'm realizing that during the pandemic, I was reading a news article about a company that bought an old hotel property in Miami, and they were doing a renovation. It explained the philosophy of the company and the kinds of things they were doing in the renovation. And I read that news article in my local newspaper. Now, that had to have come from a press release because my local newspaper doesn't have a correspondent in Miami or anything like that, right?
Right.
But I remember reading the article, and I remember I looked up the company's website. And in 2022, when I started to travel again, I stayed at that hotel. And I actually just booked myself for February in the same hotel again. So that's 2 hotel bookings that have come from their general website that they have no idea probably originated from a press release 2 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And so is it as easy as you say then? Is it just a matter of writing something up and sending it out? Or is there a certain formula that creates a successful press release?
Right. So I am going to peel back the truth here. Most press releases don't generate earned media. That's what we call it when someone writes about you. That being said, the 2 most common type of press releases we get are a personnel change. And it's usually not the CEO or a big executive or an industry veteran. It's usually like a new associate of HR. And I don't know why people move these press releases. I certainly wouldn't pay to send something like that over the wire. Maybe your local newspaper will pick it up, and maybe a trade publication will put a little on the move section, and that's about it. If you're going to deploy money and spend on a service that gets you on the wire, you really want to make sure you're newsworthy enough. The second most common type of press release we get is a product launch press release, and they're all pretty much, here's the product, and here's a list of features. There might be an image of the product and a page for more information. But you got to remember, journalists are story builders, and they like to have a story arc to the articles that they write. A product launch with just a list of features rarely does it. And it's so easy to enhance it to make it more of what they're looking for. Add a use case study, a customer who used your product, what their obstacle was, what the results were from using your product, have a quote from them, and all of a sudden you contextually have much more of a story for a journalist to work. Knowing that it solves their problem better, because they're trying to decide what is worthy to get through us as gatekeepers to share with our audience that they're going to be interested and fascinated with. And just a new product with a list of features rarely does it. So really try to reverse engineer, looking from the angle of a journalist, what could I do to make this more meaningful to their audience, more entertaining, more fascinating, more educational.
And so, in the example of the hotel story that I was just talking about, quotes from guests after the reopening. What did they think? Why do they like it? Are they frequent travelers? How do they like this compared to other things? That sort of thing.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. Anything along those lines, just getting people's perspectives, it enhances it, because people trust third parties, even though they're your customers, if you cherry picked who they are based on their experiences. But it establishes more trust and more credibility in an article when you have other people talking about it.
Now, on your website, of course, you have some information about all the different things that you do, and I noted a couple of interesting statistics. One of them is that you'd put out over 100,000 press releases since founding the company, and so obviously you've got years of experience of seeing what works and what doesn't. But here's what I'd like to know is, do you have any kind of feedback to know if a journalist does anything with the article, or do you have to go and sort of kind of look on your own? Like, did they report back? Like
they rarely report back. They will generally only contact you if they need clarification, or they want more information, or maybe they're working on a story that's not directly about what you publish, but they'd like to get your opinion on it. And so, yeah, you really have to do some work, but it's not extremely difficult. I've found that if you do a Google News search and the Google web search using the date function, and start the date from the day that you issued the press release to now, that's a great way to find all new web pages that started from that date, as well as news pages. And the reason that the web is useful, in addition to the news, a lot of publications have opted out of Google News. We don't want Google stealing our content, but they still show up in Google web searches. So that's why I recommend doing both of those. It's not going to pick up everything. There's still stuff behind paywalls and other things that you're not going to get to. But I find that for most small businesses and entrepreneurs, it's pretty effective at picking up probably 90% of what we'll get out there. And when the flip side is, you could use a service that picks up these clips and stuff like that. But a good clipping service is probably going to set you back $2,000 or $3,000 a month. And if you think you're going to get picked up in a monthly, you may have to monitor for 5 months, and you could easily spend, $10,000 to track a $400 press release. So I think that the Google Web search, adding the dates, and the Google News search using dates is a really good way to sort of winnow down possible pickup. And I find that that's a really effective, frugal way of sort of trying to track where your pickup is. The other thing is also ask your customers where they came from.
Oh, I want to ask you a little bit about those articles, but first I want to just pop this up. Victor from Nottingham over in the UK says he just gave the show a like. Thank you very much, Victor, and anyone who's watching, please do the same. It's one of the things that helps the algorithm know that the content is good and that we're having an interesting conversation. And just like Victor, if you have a direct question for Mickie at any time during the show, pop it into the comments. We'll be sure to get to them as we move through the conversation here. But once something's been published, that is using information from the press release that is a piece of publicity. How then should businesses be taking advantage of that? I mean, it's great to know that you appeared in the paper, but I mean, in my experience, this can be something that you can leverage into further credibility, correct?
Right. So, take screenshots of it. These pages do disappear. Sometimes they'll last for years. Sometimes they'll last for months, and you just don't know. There's always, content management systems change and they purge old articles. So you want to make sure that you have screenshots of it. But as soon as it happens, take that link and share it with your social media. Put it on your website. Share it with your customers. If you have a newsletter, share it with your leads. I talked about how people read an article and they get this great feeling and they want to do business with you. The same thing can happen with your leads. And I don't know what your conversion rate is, but there's always a huge number of leads you never convert. And you don't know how close they potentially were to converting into a customer. And this article might be the little push that gets them over the hump. So make sure you utilize this earned media as you get it, and put it out there, as well as put it on your website. I do try to tell people to start a newsroom where they put their press releases and their articles. But if that's, I also recognize small businesses are wearing a lot of hats. So if you don't have that, but you have a blog, start a new category in your blog called news or something, just for tracking purposes. You can always, break it out later if you want to, but, try to just put the content on your website, because it's great content. The words are usually keyword rich and natural. So they will help to drive traffic to you and around you. And another thing that I've had clients do is put together a brag book. One carpet company in New Jersey that approached me and said, we want to do a 1-year campaign with you, one press release a month. And I told them that I didn't think it was going to work for them, but they were willing to work with me, and we brainstormed together. And at month 5, we finally figured out an angle that worked really well. And they got picked up in a lot of floor trade publications, which is interesting because none of their customers read those. It's other carpet companies. But they put together this brag book, and at the end of the year, they had over 30 articles. It did include their local newspaper and New Jersey Magazine, but all the rest were trade publications. And whenever they gave someone a quote in their home, they would say, hey, we're not going to come in the cheapest, but we're nationally recognized. Here we are in Floor Trade Weekly. And they just go through it for a few seconds. 17% increase in conversions, just adding that brag book to their sales conversation.
Just lending credibility.
Yes, huge credibility that just happens naturally. It is almost like an implied endorsement when people cover you. And if I'm looking at getting carpet installed, and I've got someone who's like $400 more for my whole house, but they've been picked up in 30 publications, that's a big credibility signal that the other guy that just came in and gave me a brochure can't match. And so I'm more likely to convert personally for someone who's recognized.
Now, you mentioned it took you a few months to figure out the angle that would work. Can you kind of describe, the strategy, or how the strategy might have changed in this example or a similar one?
Absolutely. So we were just trying general types of press releases. They were not doing anything different than anybody else. I mean, they did feel that, they had a great team, they had great installers, they had been around for a while, and nobody seemed to care with that approach. And so at month 5, we were having a brainstorm session, and I was just asking who their biggest enemy was, going through a list that I had of just brainstorming things. And I was expecting it to be like, oh, Ed across the street, he's always, setting me off. But it was big box home improvement stores, the Home Depot and Lowe's of the world. And they just went into a rant of how bad they are for going against carpet companies. For example, he says, they don't call a list of carpet installers to install their carpets. They just call the state home improvement licensed people on the list, and they go down and say, hey, we have a job for tomorrow at 11. And if you're a home contractor who's never installed carpet, but you don't have any work, you're going to say, yeah, I'll take that job. And I'm
Oh,
installing carpet tomorrow that may not be stretched properly. The seams may, be very noticeable. And those are the types of experiences that they see often and have to go into homes and fix or correct or, do over. And so, that was one of the angles. The other being the padding that they use. It's usually, 2 or 3 versions of padding, and they're just not as good as the ones that they use. And according to them, padding is the most important thing for longevity of carpet.
okay.
And I take their word for it. But we sent those out, and it really resonated with the trade and publications. They really love talking about that. And we milked that again and again. We did probably the next 4 or 5 releases were variations of marketing. And it turns out that these trade publications weren't talking about marketing much, and they weren't talking about marketing against the big guys, David versus Goliath approach. And they were very interested in that subject matter. One of them even offered a marketing column to this carpet company. And they're just
Holy
like,
cow.
no, thanks. Because they were being seen from the publication as marketing experts for local carpet companies, because that was the angles that we were taking. But it really showed that there was something being ignored in their industry, and we hit on it, and we were able to hit on it again and again.
Now, you were also telling me that you've worked with several of the Shark Tank candidate companies, people who've gone looking for investment from the sharks on the TV show. How is it that you come to work with so many of them? Is there a certain kind of company that is easier to work with, or can derive more benefit from a press release strategy?
So we're recommended by the producers. We can't advertise that because they're a licensed brand,
Okay.
Shark Tank. But they do say that people have used us and had good experiences. They do recommend that they do a press release before their episode airs, and that's where we
Okay.
find most of them coming to us. That being said, we've had some that come to us again and again, Squatty Potty, Manscaped. But yeah, we've had really great experiences with them. It doesn't hurt that they're on a national TV show, but I think one of the reasons that they do so well with the media is that startups really know what their elevator pitch is. They know what makes them unique in the marketplace and what they're doing to differentiate themselves. And I think having that and having a story works really well. Most of the people that appear on Shark Tank open with a personal story. What inspired the company or the product. Might be inspirational or obstacle or vulnerability. They lost their job and they had this little hobby thing, and they thought, maybe I could give this a go as a business. And I think that works so well is because it humanizes them. It's a human interest element. And, going back to storytelling, it's something that really makes you connect with someone. And I think that that's another reason that, the people that appear on Shark Tank do so well with media is they're willing to use that, use their story. I've had clients that come to me, and the one thing that is frustrating is they want to seem ultra professional. They want to seem bigger than they are. They don't want to acknowledge that they're a home-based business. Or, I had one client who said they canceled Thanksgiving one year because they got inundated with orders, and they're like, there's no way we can get all of these out before Christmas. And we know these people want them, so they canceled Thanksgiving, got the whole family together, and were either in a garage or a warehouse getting orders ready. And I insisted that they include that in a press release. They really didn't want to, but they did. And it became the lead intro to a 2-page story in Inc. magazine about them. And, they just couldn't believe that thing that they felt was embarrassing would resonate with people. And it really does. I think people really like, the personal story. It builds trust and authority. It really is something that a lot of entrepreneurs identify with, setbacks, obstacles, things that we encounter. And I think that is really shows the magic of a good story.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up. One of the things that I do every year is I make this special offer to my audience for consulting calls, and I offer them at a discounted price. But the caveat is that people have to be willing to release those for other people to listen to. And they can appear anonymously if they want, if it's a discussion about something really private. And I just finished recording all the ones for this season. And it goes out to people on the email list. So if people are not on the email list, it's davidcbarnettlist.com. They should sign up. But the most consistent feedback that I get about those calls versus my regular Wednesday answering a question call is that the Wednesday videos that I make, I'm basically talking sort of academically about a certain topic. It's like, here's the problem, here's the solution, this is how it works. But in those holiday chat calls, like I spend an hour sometimes with people and we get the whole backstory. We get to learn why something is important. We get to learn why someone maybe is a little bit anxious about one thing or the other, or they're curious or they're concerned, or, I get to ask questions and really explore and open things up. And to your point, it always ends up becoming this much bigger story than what the initial inquiry was always about. And I totally understand what you're saying. It's getting in there, exploring the story, exploring the humanity, which then leads me to ask this question. You mentioned earlier about the product press releases, how it's just, here's the new product, here's the advantages, et cetera, et cetera. Should these things be written in a fashion that somebody could just cut and paste it right into a piece of media?
It's possible. Those are generally called features. They can do well with minor news, like a lot of your local daily papers will run features, copy and paste. But a lot of your larger publications don't like to do that. For one thing,
Sure.
they feel like it's a copyright issue, that if they copy and paste, they really don't own the copyright of that article. And so a lot of them really feel like they want to touch it and play with it. I have seen some work with national publications, but they're generally like top 10 list or things along those lines where it's more understandable that it would be more copy and paste. I've seen a lot of like new podcast do a roundup of the top 10 podcasts in their industry, and they put themselves as like number 7. But all the rest are very well-known podcasts. So someone perusing that's just going to say, yeah, it looks like a good roundup someone did. I'll just copy and paste the whole thing. And it's a great way for you to sort of sneak in there. But, other things I've seen.
Let me write that down.
Other things I've seen people do are like, yearly predictions and trends, forecasts for the coming year and things like that, where they're more likely to copy and paste a bit of it because it's your, putting all that useful information out there. But I think that for a lot of people, sticking to the elements of a press release generally works better outside of those types of press releases. But I think that, data is something that the media loves. So if you have an article, are there ways that you could beef it up by having some data? Like you do have a new product and you've added a use case study, but maybe you could talk about the context of the problem that this customer had. Maybe the customer doesn't have data about how bad their marketing is, but you could point out that, like, looking at public data, that maybe 67% of all failures of new companies in your industry are because of a lack of marketing.
Well, I'm just, you're talking about data and you're talking about press releases. It brings to mind two different examples. One would be the U-Haul moving index. All they're doing is using their own data about one-way rentals, and they release information about where people are migrating, as far as trailer rentals. And then one of the past guests that I've had on here, Doug Hoyes, who is a bankruptcy trustee in Ontario, they release an annual report. They call it their Joe Debtor Study, where they aggregate all the data from the people that have gone bankrupt, and they make a big deal out of it. They say, here's how the trends are changing. Here's the median age changing, or more women this year versus men, or whatever it happens to be, and they get a tremendous amount of press out of it because a lot of the media will look at these bits of information they're releasing and go, wow, that's interesting. and then Doug gets invited to be interviewed and things like this. And so I'm wondering if people might not be able to take a look at what they're doing in their own business and find some kind of information that they can generate from their own customer dealings that could be formatted in an interesting way that might be seen as being newsworthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes even if you don't have that data, you can produce the data by doing a survey or study within your industry. Whenever clients come to me and they said, I've just tried everything and I'm feeling like PR is not for me, I always say, well, are you willing to do a survey or study within your industry? Because that's the one that always generates media. The least I've ever seen is 4 articles. Often it's between 8 and 14 original articles from one press release. And it may sound daunting, but it's like, you want to make sure you're asking really relevant questions, ones that are very timely, specific to now, specific to your industry. There are a lot of people who are having things going on in their business that could be an indicator of things going on in your industry. Are you having trouble getting people to want to work in the office? Are you having trouble establishing a culture because so many people are working from home? Are you going to be spending substantially less in the next 2 quarters on marketing? These are questions that you can put together. I recommend 16 questions in the average survey, 4 questions per page. Build it out in SurveyMonkey, takes 5 minutes. And then send it out to your industry. A lot of people then say, I don't know who to send it to. There are independent and small trade associations in every industry. If like the PR industry, I was like, well, I know the big guy, but there's probably nobody else. There's literally like over 150 that I've looked at that are, some of them are very specific to, a particular person's demographic background or something, but a lot of them are regional. Some of them may just be the size of, working for solo PR firms or things like that. So find a smaller independent one. Ask if they'll take that link and share it with their members in exchange for you mentioning them in a press release you'll be issuing over the wire. The small and independent trade associations get no love from the media. So a lot of them are going to see this as a win-win, and they'll share it with their members. You then analyze the data, look at the big 2 or 3 surprises, and focus that on the press release. You're not going to focus on all 16 questions, but I do feel it's important to build a page out on your website where you put all the questions and answers, because sometimes a journalist will say, this is kind of interesting what you did, but I'd like to look at the survey and see if there's something else there. And maybe they'll pull out a different focus of the article that they end up writing on. Put some amazing quotes in the press release why you feel the numbers skewed a particular way. You're the expert. It only takes you saying you're the expert to do the survey to be an expert. I have one client who started this. They represent lots of little verticals in their industry, and they are doing between 30 and 40 annual surveys now all across all of these verticals. And every single one of them I check still gets 8 to 14 articles, almost every single one of them. And it's a great way for them to get lots of links to all these little vertical locations on their website. Gets people in the industry talking about them. They're really recognized, and it just works again and again for them. So do not underestimate a great survey. And again, a lot of my clients, they have this feeling that they're just not important enough to be an expert and to do a survey. But all it takes is you doing it. That company had, they just did it. And now they're recognized for it. And people look for that annual survey in that industry every single year. And it really just comes down to asking great questions.
Yeah. So for someone out there who is who's in business and they want to start to do more with press releases and trying to get recognized in the media, the first step, it sounds like, is it to understand who ultimately you want to reach, like what customers you want to reach, and then figure out what media they might be paying attention to, and then what would that media be interested in? Is it simply a matter of sort of reverse engineering the flow of these interests to try to figure out what should go in the document?
It is. It completely is. It's like, where are your target customers? What are they reading? Sometimes I've had people reverse engineer it in the wrong way. I had someone who had a golf product, and they're like, we really want to go to the Wall Street executives, so we're going to pick banking as one category that we want to target, and business magazines is the other. And I'm just like, well, we have a golf category. They're like, it's too small. There's only less than 20 publications or writers in there. And I told them, I think that's a big mistake. They're just like, no, we want to go to the banking. Nobody picked it up in the banking or business publications. These are people who are interested in banking news. They're interested in business news. It doesn't mean, I mean, in the golf category was a Wall Street Journal author, a journalist, but he was in that category because he's interested in golfing products for business professionals. And so they came back and we sent it to the golf category. He got picked up in 3 places and sold over $250,000 worth of his product. And that's what happens when you're super focused. It's not necessarily quantity, it's finding out also who's a good fit, because sometimes your customers, they certainly are people who read the Wall Street Journal and American banking magazines and things like that, but you have to go where journalists are do they ever cover golf clubs? Who are the journalists there, and try to find a better fit.
So on your website, it says that your company has generated over 87 million in earned media. Can you describe for everyone just how you calculate that? Like, how do you figure that the value of what's been produced?
It was mostly anecdotal. We've had some surveys where we've asked customers, how much sales do you feel were generated, and that was it. I imagine the true number is probably many times that. Because a lot of people didn't complete the survey. I also know of one guy who did a press release and got picked up in a trade publication for municipal waste. And they were people who sell basically municipal waste centers, like in a kit,
like machinery, compacting machinery, and all that sort of thing. Yeah,
and it starts at $30 million. And he got a client in Australia that they signed up, and he's like, "This is a minimum $30 million sale. So great job." And I'm just like, "Well, wow, just one sell. When they start at that price is substantial. But a lot of it is also converting more of your existing customers, because as you get more and more media coverage and people see you in the news, the amount of churn that you have of customers who leave you because they're like, not sure if we're the best company, let's try someone different this year.
Yeah.
When they see you in the news, they're like, we don't have to shop for anybody else, we're with the right company. And those are numbers that also are really hard to calculate, as well as converting more leads that perhaps you wouldn't have if you hadn't put these articles in front of them.
I've seen and read articles about people out there who try to game this media sort of representation. You'll see someone and they'll advertise as seen in Forbes or something, and then you'll read something saying, well, that was like a paid feature, like they basically paid money so that they could put as seen in this magazine or whatever onto their website. Can you comment a little bit about that? Like, are things changing at all, or people's sort of feelings about the credibility of different news sources?
I think so. I think when I see someone who's been featured in Forbes, I immediately say they weren't in the print magazine. I can guarantee that they're on a section of the website that's usually where individuals can just post content, or sometimes they'll write an article, but they tend to be all aligned with someone's clients at a firm that is a paid placement type thing. So I think that some people are smart about that. That's one that always pops up on my radar when I see that. I think that natural placement is probably the most ideal, and probably passes the smell test among most people. When you see someone on the actual Wall Street Journal, when they're reading it and it's an actual article written by a regular journalist, they know that that's real and legitimate, and as opposed to a link on Forbes that doesn't appear in the print publication or something along those lines.
Because I've heard of stories of people sending press releases to small town NBC affiliate in some far flung rural place, and and it gets put on their website, and then all of a sudden the person is claiming that, as seen on NBC or something like this.
Yeah, that happens a lot. There's something that happens with press releases called syndication. It happens with the big news wires. It also happens with non-news wires. There's a lot of places out there with wire in their name that are only syndication plays. It never reaches a journalist. A journalist never considers your press release for an article, but they will get like a list of 50 to 200 of these links that'll be like usually a subdomain on that TV news outlet that has a roundup of press releases. And sure enough, if you go there, you can, grab the logo, you see a link to your press release, but it's not an article that's been written about you. And a lot of that I think is a distraction, because the goal of PR is to get earned media, not to have your press release on a website, but to actually have an article written by a journalist who chose to write about you.
So what we're talking about then is the difference between actual people out in the public who may see an article and be influenced by something written in that journalism piece about your business, the product, etc., versus someone who's just trying to get a bunch of logos, to give themselves sort of credibility.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm glad that we were able to bring that up, because it's something that I'm seeing more and more often. We have a question in here. Victor's asking, how do you get connected with the right journalists for mutual benefit? They need the stories and the businesses need the publicity. And I suppose you're kind of in the middle of that, right, with what eReleases does.
Right. So for us, when it comes to PR, there's two approaches. And one is what PR firms do. They'll often issue a release on the wire, but they'll also pitch directly to journalists. And a lot of our clients are PR firms who do that. And that's great because, they have a Rolodex. Ideally, a good PR firm is industry specific, because they just can't have contacts across, all the different industries and relationships with them. And so a good PR firm in a particular industry will be able to pitch and call on favors. And even better, if they've got them on the phone and a journalist shuts down that pitch, a good PR firm will pivot and say, well, how about this, which is a completely different approach or take, and try to salvage a different way of approaching what could be a great story for a journalist. The press release side of it and issuing over wire, the value of that is if you have something that's newsworthy, it could potentially get picked up in a lot of places. During the pandemic, we did a free press release for the Dining Bond Initiative, which was associated with a PR firm that we work with. And they did one press release. We quit counting at 150 articles. There's a case study on my website about it. All the major publications picked it up. International pickup happened as well. Lots of daily newspapers. And that's where we stopped counting because it just seemed like potentially 250, 300 places picked it up. Yeah. From just hitting send once on a wire, all of that happened, generated in excess of $10 million in revenue for restaurants that were closed during the pandemic. It's a wild, extreme example, but it shows if you have something that's really newsworthy, the leverage of a newswire could potentially go really far. An individual publicist just can't pitch to a couple hundred people and get 100% pickup. But if you have something that's newsworthy, and in this case, it was really positive news that you could actually take action, help a restaurant that was closed during the pandemic. We were sitting home for 2 weeks, waiting out, the flattening the curve. And, we felt like we didn't have any power, but here we could nominate our local favorite restaurant and immediately give them some cash, while they're closed to potentially keep them from going under. And I think that's why it did so well. And that really does show one of the leverage opportunities of PR. You don't really always know where you're going to get picked up, but if the messaging is newsworthy, it can go really wide and far.
Awesome. We got a comment here from Results Media. I think that's Paul. Great interview, David and Mickie, with valuable information on a rarely discussed strategy. Thank you for the insights. And I'm gonna second that. Thank you very much, Mickie, for coming in today and sharing your knowledge and teaching us a little bit more about this and how a newswire service can help. If people are interested in finding you online and learning more or having a conversation with you, how can they reach out and find you?
Okay, so the website's ereleases.com. All my social media is there. I do have a free masterclass that talks about the strategies you should consider for doing a press release, so you'll focus on the ones that are more meaningful and more likely to get pickup. And it's completely free at ereleases.com/plan, PLAN. And it's less than an hour long video. And it really is a great way to do an audit, especially if you haven't considered PR or are just looking to potentially build a PR campaign. It's a great place to start.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'd also like to remind everyone who's tuned in that on Friday, it is time again for my Holly Jolly Christmas Eve special. But because Christmas falls where it does on the calendar this week, I'm going to do it on Friday. So I've got a whole bunch of past guests and friends from around the world of small business on the internet that are going to be stopping by. It's going to be all afternoon, probably 3 hours or more. And so please stop on by Friday afternoon. Check that out. It'll be on the YouTube channel. And with that, I'll say thank you very much, and we'll sign off. So, how can you learn more about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium-sized businesses? Easy. Go over to my blog site, davidcbarnett.com, where you can learn more about me and how I work with my clients. You can learn more about my books and courses that I've prepared for you. You can find out how to subscribe to my email list, the YouTube playlists, and more. There's literally hundreds of hours of content there, all for free, and I'd love for you to be my guest. Special thanks go to Mark Willis at Lake Growth Financial, today's video sponsor. Mark helps people better manage their personal and business finances through the Bank on Yourself insurance strategy. This is something I've done personally and I've seen others use it successfully for years. Go to newbankingsolution.com to find all the interviews I've done with Mark and learn more about the advantages of these programs. While there, sign up for a free consultation to learn what this solution might look like for you.